Racist neighbor Karen calls the police and discovers that the black man is actually Will Smith. The late summer sun cast long shadows across the perfectly manicured lawns of Oak Grove Estate as Will Smith stood in his new driveway, surrounded by moving boxes. The prestigious neighborhood, known for its historic homes and tight-knit community, seemed to hold its breath as he methodically unloaded his belongings. After years of dedicated service in law enforcement, his recent promotion to Chief of Police had finally allowed him to purchase a home in one of the city's most desirable areas. The colonial-style house before him, with its crisp white paint and elegant black shutters, represented not just a new chapter in his life, but a statement about progress and change. As he carried boxes from his car to the front door, he couldn't help but notice the subtle movement of curtains in neighboring windows, the quick glances that disappeared when he turned his head, and the uncomfortable silence that seemed to follow his every move. His daughter Maya, a brilliant 17-year-old honor student, emerged from the house with determination in her steps. "These neighbors sure are interested in our unpacking skills," she remarked with a knowing smile, grabbing a box labeled "Kitchen." Will had raised her to face challenges head-on, teaching her that dignity and excellence were the best responses to prejudice. As they worked together in comfortable synchronicity, a sleek white SUV pulled into the driveway of the house next door. The woman who stepped out embodied every stereotype of suburban privilege, from her perfectly styled blonde hair to her designer yoga outfit. Her face twisted into an expression of barely concealed displeasure as she observed Will and Maya going about their tasks. Will had encountered that look countless times throughout his career, the mixture of surprise, disapproval, and fear that some people couldn't help but display when confronted with someone who didn't fit their preconceptions. He continued his work, maintaining his composure and dignity, even as he felt the weight of her stare on his back. The neighbor, who would soon become known to them simply as Karen, made a show of pulling out her phone and making a call while standing in her driveway, her voice deliberately carrying across the manicured lawn. "Yes, there's someone suspicious unloading things at 1242 Oak Grove Drive. I don't recognize them, and they certainly don't look like they belong here." Maya tensed beside her father, but Will placed a gentle hand on her shoulder. "Let her make her call," he said quietly. "Sometimes people need to learn their lessons the hard way." Within minutes, 2 police cruisers pulled up to the house, their arrival drawing more neighbors to their windows. Officer Sarah Martinez and Officer James Chen, both of whom had worked under Will at his previous precinct, stepped out of their vehicles, struggling to maintain professional expressions as they approached the scene. "Good afternoon, ma'am," Officer Martinez addressed the neighbor, who was now standing with her arms crossed, a triumphant expression on her face. "We received a call about suspicious activity." "Yes, finally," Karen exclaimed, pointing an accusatory finger at Will. "This man has been unloading things into the Petersons' old house, and I know for a fact that this is a restricted community. All new residents must be approved by the Homeowners Association Board." Officer Chen cleared his throat, sharing a quick glance with his partner. "Ma'am, are you aware that you just called the police on the new Chief of Police?" The color drained from Karen's face as Will calmly reached into his pocket and produced his badge, along with the house deed. "Will Smith," he introduced himself with a polite nod. "I'm actually looking forward to working with the local precinct to strengthen community relations in this neighborhood." The revelation sent shockwaves through the gathered crowd. Some neighbors quickly retreated into their homes, while others emerged, curious about the unfolding scene. Among them was Dr. Patricia Anderson, a respected cardiac surgeon who lived across the street, who approached with an extended hand and a warm smile. "Chief Smith, welcome to Oak Grove. I was thrilled when I heard about your appointment," she said, purposefully ignoring Karen's sputtering attempts to backtrack. "We've been hoping to establish better communication between the medical community and law enforcement regarding emergency response protocols." As the embarrassed officers departed and Karen retreated into her house, more neighbors began to approach, some with genuine welcomes, others clearly struggling to reconcile their preconceptions with the reality before them. Will observed them all, noting the complex social dynamics at play, understanding that his presence would challenge long-held beliefs and comfortable assumptions. That evening, as Will and Maya sat among their boxes eating pizza, they watched through the window as Karen paced in her backyard, gesturing animatedly while on her phone. The neighborhood association's message board was already buzzing with discussion about the new arrival, and tomorrow would bring its own challenges. "You know this is just the beginning, right?" Maya asked, her voice mixing concern with determination. Will nodded, thinking about all the barriers he'd broken throughout his career. "Change never comes easy, sweetheart. But that's exactly why we're here. Not just to live in this house, but to open doors for others who might follow." As night fell over Oak Grove Estate, the wheels of change had already been set in motion. Will Smith's arrival would test not just the community's stated values of excellence and tradition, but their deeper capacity for growth and acceptance. The stage was set for a transformation that would ripple through the neighborhood, challenging everyone to confront their own biases and preconceptions. The days following Will Smith's arrival in Oak Grove Estate revealed the complex social fabric of the community. While some residents made genuine efforts to welcome their new neighbor, others, led by Karen, began a subtle campaign of resistance that would test the limits of civility and expose long-hidden prejudices. The first Homeowners Association meeting after Will's arrival became the battlefield for these opposing forces. The community center's meeting room was filled to capacity, with Karen positioned prominently at the front, her perfectly manicured nails drumming against the wooden podium as she called the meeting to order. "As president of the Oak Grove Estate Homeowners Association," she began, her voice carrying an edge of barely contained frustration, "I feel compelled to address recent changes in our community. There are concerns about maintaining our neighborhood's traditional character." Dr. Anderson, sitting in the front row, immediately raised her hand. "If by traditional character you mean exclusive and unwelcoming, perhaps it's time for that tradition to change," she stated firmly, earning murmurs of agreement from several residents. Will sat quietly, observing the dynamics unfolding before him. Throughout his career, he had learned that sometimes the most powerful response was simply to let others reveal their true nature. Maya, beside him, took careful notes, already planning how this experience would shape her future law school applications. Karen's attempts to institute stricter residential guidelines were met with unexpected resistance. Robert Chen, a retired federal judge, stood up to speak. "I've lived here for 30 years, he announced, his voice commanding respect. "And I've watched as this community used traditional values as a shield for exclusion. Chief Smith's arrival might be exactly what we need to bring Oak Grove into the modern era." The meeting devolved into heated debate about property values, community safety, and the changing atmosphere of the neighborhood. Through it all, Will maintained his composed demeanor, even as thinly veiled comments about certain elements and maintaining standards were thrown around the room. Meanwhile, Maya was navigating her own challenges at the local high school. Despite her exceptional academic record, she found herself mysteriously passed over for advanced placement opportunities. The guidance counselor, a close friend of Karen's, suggested that some students might find the pressure overwhelming. One afternoon, while Maya was studying in the school library, she overheard Karen's daughter Ashley speaking to her friends. "My mom says they only made him chief for publicity," Ashley said loudly, clearly intending to be heard. "It's all about looking progressive these days." Maya closed her book and approached their table. "Actually," she said calmly, "my father earned his position through 20 years of exemplary service, multiple commendations, and a master's degree in criminal justice. But thank your mom for her concern." The confrontation caught the attention of Mr. Rodriguez, the social studies teacher, who later assigned a class project on modern civil rights movements and systemic change. He deliberately paired Maya with Ashley, recognizing an opportunity to bridge divides through education. Back in the neighborhood, Will's presence was catalyzing unexpected transformations. Dr. Anderson organized a community health and safety fair, deliberately integrating police outreach programs with local medical services. The event drew residents from across the city, much to Karen's visible distress. "This isn't what Oak Grove events are supposed to be like," Karen complained to her inner circle during their weekly tennis match. "These people, they're changing everything." Maybe change is exactly what we need, responded Jennifer Martinez, a long-time resident who had previously supported Karen's initiatives. Have you noticed how much safer the neighborhood feels since Chief Smith implemented the new community policing program? The tension reached a new level when Will announced plans for a neighborhood watch program that would bring residents and police officers together in regular meetings. While Karen saw it as an invasion of their exclusive enclave, others recognized it as an opportunity to build genuine community connections. One evening, as Will worked in his home office reviewing department policies, he received an unexpected visit from Judge Chen. The retired judge carried a thick folder and a determined expression. "Chief Smith," he said, settling into a chair, "I think you should see these." The folder contained decades of documents, records of systematic exclusion, manipulated property, values, and carefully worded guidelines designed to maintain what Karen and her predecessors called the character of Oak Grove Estate. "I've kept these records waiting for the right moment, the right person to help make real change," Judge Chen explained. "The question is, are you ready for the battle that will come when we challenge these practices?" Will studied the documents thoughtfully, understanding that they represented both an opportunity and a responsibility. The truth about Oak Grove's history of exclusion could either tear the community apart or become the catalyst for meaningful transformation. As the evening light filtered through his office window, Will caught sight of Maya and Dr. Anderson's daughter Sarah working on their homework together on the front porch, their laughter carrying across the carefully maintained lawns. In that moment, he saw what Oak Grove could become, not a fortress of privilege, but a true community where differences were celebrated rather than feared. The path ahead would require careful navigation, strategic thinking, and unwavering principle. But as Will had learned throughout his career, real change never comes without resistance, and the greatest victories often emerge from the most challenging battles. The documents Judge Chen had shared with Will Smith proved to be more revealing than anyone could have anticipated. As he delved deeper into Oak Grove's history, patterns emerged that painted a troubling picture of systematic exclusion spanning decades. However, it was a recent series of incidents that caught his professional attention. A string of suspicious property devaluations that seemed to target specific potential buyers. Will spent his evenings carefully analyzing the records, cross-referencing dates and names, while building a comprehensive timeline. Maya often joined him, her interest in law making her a keen observer of the subtle legal implications hidden within the paperwork. "Dad, look at this," she said one evening, pointing to a recurring name in the documents. "Karen isn't just the HOA president, she's also on the board of the local real estate association, and every time a minority family showed interest in properties here over the last 5 years, there were suddenly structural issues discovered during inspection." The revelation added another layer to the complex situation they faced. Will understood that confronting these practices would require more than just evidence. It would need a strategy that could create lasting change without tearing the community apart. Meanwhile, Karen had begun organizing what she called community preservation meetings at her home. Through the grapevine, Will learned that these gatherings were attended by several influential residents who shared her concerns about maintaining property values and neighborhood character. Dr. Anderson, who had become an unexpected ally, managed to attend one of these meetings under the pretense of social obligation. Later that evening, she came to Will's house, visibly disturbed by what she had witnessed. "They're planning to challenge your appointment as chief," she revealed, her voice tight with concern. "Karen has connections on the city council, and they're trying to build a case that your presence is causing community instability. They're even collecting signatures for a petition." Will remained calm, having anticipated such moves. "Let them try," he replied, sharing a knowing look with Maya. "Sometimes people need to show their true colors before real change can happen." The situation took an unexpected turn when Ashley, Karen's daughter, approached Maya after their joint social studies project. The girls had been forced to work together, researching the history of housing discrimination in America, and the experience had clearly affected Ashley deeply. "I found something in my mum's home office," Ashley confided, her voice barely above a whisper. "Documents about property values and buyer screening processes. I think what they're doing is wrong." Maya immediately told her father about Ashley's revelation. Will recognized both the opportunity and the delicacy of the situation. A teenager's conscience could be the key to exposing years of discriminatory practices, but he needed to proceed carefully to protect both Ashley and the integrity of any potential investigation. Judge Chen, when consulted, offered his experienced perspective. "This could be the thread that unravels the whole sweater," he mused. "But we need to build a solid case. These practices have gone unchallenged for too long because they're so carefully disguised as community standards." The breakthrough came from an unexpected source. Jennifer Martinez, who had recently distanced herself from Karen's inner circle, approached Will after a community policing meeting. As a real estate agent herself, she had access to records that could prove the systematic nature of the discrimination. "I can't be part of this anymore," she explained, handling over a USB drive. "What's happening here? It's not just wrong, it's illegal. And I think Karen knows that, but she's convinced herself she's protecting something valuable." As Will reviewed the new evidence with his team at the police department, he realized they had uncovered more than just discriminatory housing practices. The documents revealed a network of influence that extended beyond Oak Grove, affecting housing patterns across the entire city. The situation reached a critical point when Karen, unaware that her position was already compromised, attempted to call an emergency HOA meeting to discuss security concerns in the neighborhood. The real agenda, as Will well knew, was to build support for challenging his residency and his position as chief. Dr. Anderson and several other residents, now fully aware of the stakes involved, began organizing their own response. They planned to attend the meeting in force, ready to confront the long-standing practices that had shaped Oak Grove's exclusive character. The evening before the scheduled meeting, Will sat with Maya on their front porch, watching the sunset paint the sky in brilliant oranges and purples. Despite the challenges they faced, there was a sense of progress in the air. "You know what's interesting, Dad?" Maya observed, looking out at the neighborhood they were fighting to change. "Some of these people are so afraid of losing something precious, they can't see that they're actually fighting to keep something ugly." Will nodded, understanding that the coming confrontation would determine not just his family's future in Oak Grove, but the community's ability to evolve beyond its troubled past. The evidence they had gathered would force everyone to face uncomfortable truths about their privileged enclave. As night fell over Oak Grove Estate, lights began to appear in windows, and Will could see Karen's silhouette pacing in her living room, presumably rehearsing her speech for tomorrow's meeting. Little did she know that her carefully constructed world of exclusivity and privilege was about to face its greatest challenge yet. The Oak Grove Estate Community Center had never been so packed. The emergency HOA meeting called by Karen drew nearly every resident, the tension in the air thick enough to cut with a knife. Will Smith sat calmly in the front row, Maya beside him, both fully aware that this evening would change their community forever. Karen stood at the podium, her usual, confident demeanor slightly shaken by the unexpected turnout. She had planned for her usual supporters, not this diverse crowd that included faces she'd never seen at previous meetings. Dr. Anderson sat with Judge Chen, while Jennifer Martinez occupied a strategic position near the back, her laptop ready. "We're here today," Karen began, her voice carrying its usual artificial sweetness, "to discuss serious concerns about recent changes in our community, changes that threaten the very character and value of Oak Grove Estate." Before she could continue, Judge Chen stood up. "Point of order," he announced, his authoritative voice filling the room. "Before we proceed, I believe we need to address some irregularities in the HOA's operating procedures, specifically the selective application of community guidelines." Karen's face flushed. "This meeting was called to discuss security concerns." "You mean my presence in the neighborhood?" Will interrupted calmly, standing to face the assembly. "Or perhaps we should discuss the real security concerns, like the systematic manipulation of property values and buyer screenings that have kept this community artificially exclusive." The room erupted in murmurs as Will nodded to Jennifer, who connected her laptop to the projector. Documents appeared on the screen, emails, meeting minutes, and property assessments that painted a damning picture of orchestrated discrimination. As Chief of Police, Will continued, his voice steady, I cannot ignore evidence of illegal practices even when they're disguised as community standards. But as your neighbor, I'm more interested in having an honest conversation about the kind of community we want to be. Ashley, sitting apart from her mother, stood up suddenly. Mom, she said, her voice trembling but determined, what you're doing is wrong. The research Maya and I did for our social studies project, it showed us how housing discrimination shaped cities, how it hurt people. We're still doing the same things today. Karen stared at her daughter in shock, but before she could respond, Dr. Anderson took the floor. I've lived here for 15 years, she began, and I've always known about these practices. I stayed quiet, told myself it wasn't my problem. But watching how this community treated Will and Maya when they arrived, it forced me to confront my own complicity. One by one, residents began to speak up. Stories emerged of potential buyers mysteriously discouraged, of community standards used as weapons, of silent compliance with practices they knew were wrong. The carefully maintained facade of Oak Grove Estate was crumbling, revealing the ugly truth beneath its manicured lawns and perfect houses. Jennifer Martinez projected more documents, including recent emails showing Karen's attempts to orchestrate opposition to Will's appointment as chief. The evidence was irrefutable, and the room grew silent as the full scope of the discrimination became clear. Karen, her face now ashen, gripped the podium. Everything I did was to protect our community, she insisted, but her voice lacked its usual conviction. Property values, safety, maintaining standards. Standards based on exclusion aren't standards worth maintaining, Will interjected, his voice firm but compassionate. Real community safety comes from inclusion, from knowing and caring about your neighbors, not from keeping people out. Maya stood beside her father, addressing the room with the conviction of youth. Change doesn't have to mean losing something valuable, she said. It can mean gaining something even better, a true community where everyone's contributions are valued. Judge Chen then revealed the final piece of evidence, documentation showing how Karen's discriminatory practices had actually cost the community money through legal settlements quietly paid to avoid public exposure. The revelation that their HOA fees had been used to cover up discrimination was the final straw for many residents. A motion was quickly raised to hold new HOA board elections. Karen, seeing the tide turn decisively against her, gathered her belongings and left the meeting, followed by a small group of loyal supporters. As she passed Will, she paused briefly. Her expression a mixture of anger and something else, perhaps the first glimmer of understanding that her world had irreversibly changed. The meeting continued late into the evening, as residents began the difficult but necessary conversation about transforming their community. Committees were formed to review and revise HOA guidelines, establish genuine security measures based on community policing principles, and create welcome programs for new residents. As people finally began to leave, Ashley approached Will and Maya. I'm sorry, she said simply, for everything, for what my mom did, for how I acted at school. Will smiled warmly. The future belongs to those who are brave enough to change, Ashley. You showed real courage tonight. Later that evening, as Will and Maya walked home under the stars, they could feel the shift in the atmosphere of Oak Grove Estate. Change had come, not through force or confrontation alone, but through the quiet courage of people finally willing to stand up for what was right. Do you think Karen will ever accept the changes? Maya asked, watching lights go out in houses along their street. Will considered the question carefully. People can surprise you, he replied. Sometimes the hardest walls to break down are the ones we build inside ourselves. But tonight showed that change is possible, one person, one community at a time. 6 months after the transformative HOA meeting, Oak Grove Estate had become a different place. The autumn leaves painted the neighborhood in warm colors as residents gathered for the first ever Community Unity Festival, an event that would have been unthinkable under the old regime. The community center's grounds buzzed with activity. Children from various backgrounds played together on the newly installed playground equipment, while their parents mingled over potluck dishes that represented the growing diversity of the neighborhood. Will Smith stood near the grills, chatting with Judge Chen about the latest community policing initiatives that had been successfully implemented. Maya, now the president of her school's social justice club, a position she shared with Ashley, in an unexpected partnership, was helping organize activities for younger children. The two girls had become unlikely friends. Their initial antagonism transformed into a powerful alliance for change. "You know," Ashley said, taking a break from face-painting a young child's cheeks, "my mom finally asked about coming to visit this weekend." She glanced toward her father, who had taken temporary custody after Karen had left Oak Grove following the revelations of her discriminatory practices. Maya squeezed her friend's hand supportively. "How do you feel about that?" "Nervous," Ashley admitted, "but hopeful too. She's been seeing a counselor, working through her prejudices. Dad says she's really trying to change." The news of Karen's potential return sparked various reactions throughout the community. Some residents remained skeptical, while others, including Will, saw it as an opportunity to demonstrate the true meaning of inclusion and redemption. Dr. Anderson, who had been elected as the new HOA president, approached Will with a cup of coffee. "I heard about Karen," she said quietly. "The timing might actually be perfect. We're about to launch the new community integration program, and her experience, her journey, could be valuable." The program she referred to was one of many changes implemented in Oak Grove over the past months. The discriminatory housing practices had been completely dismantled, replaced by transparent policies that emphasized fairness and inclusion. Property values, contrary to the fears Karen had once stoked, had actually increased as the neighborhood gained a reputation for being progressive and welcoming. Jennifer Martinez, who had become the head of the housing committee, joined their conversation. "We've approved 5 new families this month," she reported proudly. "The waiting list is growing. People are actually seeking out Oak Grove because of our new inclusive reputation." Will smiled, remembering his first day in the neighborhood, the hostile stares and Karen's attempted intervention. The transformation hadn't been easy, but it had been worth every challenge. His position as chief of police had become a model for other districts, showing how law enforcement could work hand in hand with communities to create genuine safety and trust. Later that afternoon, as the festival continued, Maya led a presentation about the neighborhood's history project. Together with Ashley and other students, they had documented both the difficult past and the promising present of Oak Grove Estate. Their work would serve as a reminder of how communities could change when people were brave enough to confront their prejudices. "Our neighborhood story isn't just about overcoming discrimination," Maya explained to the gathered crowd. "It's about recognizing that diversity makes us stronger. That change doesn't mean losing what's valuable. It means gaining something even more precious." As the sun began to set, casting long shadows across the festival grounds, Will received an unexpected text message from Karen. It was simple but significant. "I've been following the changes in Oak Grove. You've done what I always claimed I was doing, making the neighborhood better. I was wrong. Would you be willing to meet with me before I visit Ashley?" Will showed the message to Dr. Anderson and Judge Chen. They had all witnessed how fear of change could poison a community, but they had also seen how courage and persistence could transform it. Karen's request represented another opportunity for healing and growth. The evening concluded with a lantern release ceremony, a symbolic gesture of letting go of old prejudices and embracing new beginnings. As hundreds of soft lights floated into the darkening sky, Will stood with Maya, both of them reflecting on their journey. "You know what's amazing, Dad?" Maya said, watching the lanterns rise. "When we first moved here, I thought we'd have to fight to change people's minds, but really, we just had to give them the courage to change their own minds." Will nodded, understanding the wisdom in his daughter's words. The true transformation of Oak Grove hadn't come through confrontation alone, but through the steady demonstration that inclusion and respect made a community stronger, not weaker. As residents began to disperse, making plans for future events and initiatives, Will caught sight of Ashley showing her father the text from Karen. The hope in their faces reflected the broader hope that had taken root in Oak Grove Estate, that people could change, that communities could heal, and that the future could be better than the past. The neighborhood had become more than just a collection of beautiful houses. It had become a true community, one that celebrated differences instead of fearing them. Will Smith's arrival had been the catalyst, but the transformation had required the courage and commitment of many people willing to challenge their own assumptions and stand up for what was right. As the last lanterns disappeared into the night sky, Oak Grove Estate stood as a testament to the possibility of change, a beacon of hope for other communities facing similar challenges. The journey wasn't over. There would always be new challenges to face and more progress to make, but the foundation had been laid for a future where everyone truly belonged.